Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4:02 on April 20th of 2026, and I am here to welcome you this afternoon to our Academic Affairs Committee meeting for this month. And so I appreciate everyone being with me today. As always, we have lots to talk about. Just as a point of clarification, our two student representatives are busy in the spring of their junior year. One has a baseball game this afternoon, and the other is on a field trip with the Honor Society. So they are not with us, and so we will catch them up offline on the tape, what we talk about. So I have 3 agenda items for us tonight. Mrs. Bell, I am working to keep this short, sweet, and to the point tonight. We'll see how I do. Material purchase request. We are back with our district calendar response to our previous feedback at our last meeting. And we have some updates for you. I just want to make sure you're caught up on our PDE requirements and some new updates from the Department of Education. And naturally, should we have some public comment, we would leave some time for that too. I wanted to go ahead and get us started with that first item. I have a request that says middle school presentations because I didn't catch the typo at the top of the screen, but I will fix it. This is a material request. It is not limited to the middle school. It is a mathematics request. We are delayed under our K-8 math review. I thought several years ago, I thought we would be doing it right now and bringing you a recommendation for our new mathematics material. But after we saw how complex the adoption of a new ELA curriculum would be, we felt really strongly that our teachers needed two and a half solid years of implementation, and to separate out for our K-5 teachers in particular, their implementation of new English language arts material and new math curriculum. We really wanted them to do it well, and to do it well, we wanted to slow down a little. As a result, and we spoke with the middle school because they could have potentially moved forward for their grade level math, but you might recall that they came back last month with a request to purchase their new geometry and algebra materials. And so they wanted to launch those materials first next year and then stay in pace with K-5 in the application or looking at mathematics curriculum. So we anticipate being back at this time next year or a little earlier to make a recommendation on a resource selection to begin use in 2027. And as you know, all of those things are governed by our website. I'm telling that to anyone who might be watching. You can take a look at our policy and or our process on our website. In the meantime, I'm requesting am requesting approval to move this forward to a motion with our full board for the purchase of a 1-year extension of our K-8 mathematics from Envision for a total of $88,270.17 for hard copy and digital materials for both students and teachers, and then the supplemental material workbooks that we use at the middle school. And so I'm hoping that that is okay, and I can take any questions that you might have for me. Eileen, Mrs. Bell.
Sorry, did we already purchase the new stuff that we're not using yet?
It was approved last time, and in fact, I think it was shipped, and it's either arriving, it just arrived, or it's arriving very soon.
Okay, so now we're double, I don't know what the word is, double spending, if that's the right word?
Oh, that's a great question. No, we're not. They're two different groups of children and courses. So children either take the grade level mathematics, which is what I'm asking for in terms of the extension tonight. This is the grade level mathematics at K through 8, and the algebra and geometry is for accelerated students who take accelerated courses. So you either take algebra or you take a grade level mathematics in 7th grade, and you either take algebra or geometry in 8th grade or the grade level 8th grade mathematics. So we're only buying enough material so every child gets 1 license for mathematics.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Somewhat. I'm sorry.
Dr. Yannicone, is there a way that I can explain it?
I think the key thing here is that we were ready to proceed with the revisions to the algebra and geometry curricula for the 26-27 school year. And we want to continue to use existing materials on grade level courses for 1 more year.
Okay, so we are using both.
Yes, and we have been.
Sorry, that's
we
what
have,
I didn't
and have been.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
See, I knew I just needed a phone a friend. Thanks, Dr. Yannicone. Good teamwork. KG.
So let me try to resynthesize. So for K to 8, we are extending our current program one more year, and during that year, we'll start to think about what's the next big thing. What are we going to do going forward? And we'll do
We're
that.
already starting, yes.
And we're already starting that. Great. And that would be implemented in 27, 28, hopefully. Okay. Whereas for the algebra and geometry, we already had selected a new resource and we're ready to implement that in 26, 27. Awesome.
Perfect summary. Maybe you should take the notes for the meeting. That was perfect. Should have written it right down as you said it. Thank you. Perfect. Any other questions? These are great questions. I appreciate the asks. We're excited about where we're going to go next, but we appreciate that that Savvis and Envision has continued to provide nice quality supports for our teachers and our students in the interim. So we've been happy, but we're going to take a look at lots of things going into next year. But elementary is getting started as we speak, and middle school has actually been, because they did the geometry and algebra, had already sort of started some revision and review thinking as we go into this next step. So is that okay with all of you that we place it on the full board agenda for approval tomorrow night?
Yep.
Excellent. I appreciate the support. Dr. Yannicone, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, terrific. So as you know, we discussed calendars last meeting, last month, and you guys gave us some feedback, which we took back to 3 different groups. So we went back and took a look at those half days as you had requested. Then we brought a revised calendar forward, set of calendars forward to parent advisory. We got great feedback there. They're thrilled with the changes that are proposed. We also reviewed it with building leadership and STEA leadership, which is our teachers association. The result is that we have a revised set of calendars for the next 3 years that reduces the number of half days, which was the primary ask, from 11 to 5 in total. And I'll go over those when I have a calendar in front of me in just a minute. We also use this time to change the format for readability. We actually think the new format, and we've gotten good feedback, is much more readable for the public and for our staff. So if you can go to the next slide. Let me just give a quick overview and then we'll click into the 6-7 calendar as an example. But first, as a reminder, 2 years ago, the state of Pennsylvania made the change that you no longer require 180 days and 900 or 990 hours. It is now an or. So you can have 900 hours at the elementary school or 180 days. And at the secondary level, you can have 990 hours or 180 days. And as you can see here, this year we dropped to 178 days, but far exceed the hours that are required by the state of Pennsylvania, and that will continue to be the case next year. In these changes to the half days to full days from 11 to 5, we're seeing an increase in 14 hours of instruction at the elementary level, in 16 hours at the middle school, and in 19 hours at the high school. That does not include the seniors at the high school. They have slightly fewer hours because of their graduation in June, but beyond that, we are continuing to be in excess of the state's requirements for hours of instruction. Are there any questions so far before I dive into a calendar? Okay, so let's bring up the 26-27 calendar and make it as a little bigger if we can, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That will help me and you, I'm sure. So we looked at 3 different areas of half days. The first is conferences in November and March. So if you're looking at dead center of the calendar right now, you can see in November, we dropped the Friday, November 20th half day, which we had discussed, and we kept a day and a half of conferences per our teacher contract, with a half day on the 23rd and a full day of conferences on the 24th. So you can see that information there in the Thanksgiving week. And then in addition, in March, we took the 2 half days on the 12th and the 19th, and we dropped the 19th, made that a full day of school, and took a full day of conferences on the 12th. That's to avoid people heading out for spring break a little early and avoiding the conferences. And so total conferences, we had 5 half days. We now have 1 half day. And then the second area was professional development. For professional development, you will notice on October 30th, we have a full day of school in the revised calendar. We're going to hold our Halloween parades as we always have, but in the afternoon and have a full day. And then we had 2 other, so that day was adjusted. And then the other 2 days of PD, if you can scroll down just a little, Dr. Johnston, yep, even a little bit further. So we have a half day on February 11th that our administrative team and staff really want to keep. This is a day that we look at our mid-year assessment data. And so we want to hold on to that, as well as our flex day on the 12th. And then in April, if you scroll down just a little further, we want to hold on to that Friday in April for planning of classes for the following year at our elementary schools, as well as we have our prom on that day for the high school, which tends to affect like 3/4 of the student body. And so we really didn't make too many changes to the 3 professional development days other than adjusting that Halloween day, which we got feedback is a challenge for families to have kids getting home a little early. And then the last ask was in June. We had 3 half days in June. We want to keep 2 of the 3 because our teachers really do use those afternoons for classroom cleanup and pack up, as well as some grading at the end of the year, in particular at the secondary level. But we did drop 1 on the 8th of June. So the net effect, again, is to go from 11 half days to 5 to increase the instructional minutes on the year. And then obviously, we changed the formatting of the calendars, which thus far parents, teaching staff, and administration are really happy with. So feedback, questions, thoughts about these revisions? Eileen?
The end of the year, that's the half days were because they did, at least at the high school, middle school, right? Finals.
Well, those half days will the final exams will continue. So if you take a look at June, thank you, Damien, you'll see that you have high school finals on the 8th, 9th, and 10th. But the half days are only required on the 9th and 10th for K-8. So we're trying to differentiate between, we do have some half days in January and in June that are just for the high school for final exams. So that would be June 8th. And then back in January, we have several exam days as well. Thank you, Damien. So you can see that on the 19th through the 21st. That transition week.
Oh, I see. It's in the descriptions, but there's no little shape or color.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right. We did not have a shape or a color, but we did put them down in the description to make sure that, because it's just the high school. And we don't want people to misunderstand as they sometimes plan vacations. For example, if we did a color on the 19th, we're fearful that people might think they have a 4-day weekend if they have children in the middle school, when in fact they don't.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel about the reduction in the half days and the plans there over conference days, PD days, and June days?
I liked
That's
Halloween
awesome.
being a half day personally, but
That was the one I was going to ask about, just because people had said that was a popular one.
It was a mixed point of feedback, is what I would say.
Okay.
There were parents who felt very strongly that it is a nightmare to have an elementary child come home early after spending some time parading and having a party when they have 5 hours to wait before they start to trick or treat. And then a smaller percentage of parents, in particular secondary parents, said we're good with the half day. So we split the difference and said we would go with a full day on Halloween. Teachers, we'll try it. We'll see how it goes. And and then we kept again the other 2 for obvious reasons. Thank you, Damien. If you go to 27, 28,
Okay.
exact same thing. So we made the same changes each year on the calendar? How do you like the style, the format, the appearance of the calendar?
I was gonna add that as a comment. Well, and I also have a question as well. I like the layout of it. Do you know how? And I don't know if there was feedback from the groups that have been engaged around the calendar dates. Do you know how most people interact with the calendar? Do they go and get this like format? Do they look at the actual calendar that's on the website? Do people subscribe to the calendar? Do you know how most people are getting the calendar information? I just wondered if people are using like this PDF type version, if it would be helpful to give people a link or at least like a place to go, a QR code or something, so that people could actually go and find the link so that they can add the calendar to their calendar, if that makes sense. It took me a while, like some years ago, to figure out like, oh, I can actually add the school district calendar to my calendar and have all those dates in there. So I don't know if it'd be helpful. If most people are doing it through this, I wonder if it'd be helpful to have like a QR code or a link on here to direct people as to how to actually upload the calendar to their own calendar.
Yes. So at the beginning of the year, we do include those instructions in our newsletter and in our return back to school pieces, because parents, the answer to your question is all the above. So when I send a newsletter out or the principals send a newsletter out, the top click tends to be the calendar. If a calendar is included, and it doesn't matter how many times we add the same calendar, it's the highest click every month. We also have a quick link on the district website, and the calendar is among the hot clicks that are selected on the website, along with the athletic calendar. And then if you click on the calendar, you can subscribe, and we do have a very high number of people who subscribe to the calendars. So all the above. The calendar seems to be the hot topic for any communication help or any visiting to the website. But we'll definitely look, and I like the QR code idea. We'll work with the team here to see if we can make that addition, if we haven't already done that at the building levels. We may have already done it. Yeah. I'm not sure, because sometimes they're savvier, but we can absolutely make sure that that also happens in our newsletters.
It's really helpful for if there's adjustments, right, to yes. dates especially. And not that we see many for the academic calendar, but I also obviously have the subscription to the board meetings. And obviously I see, like, you know, when they're cancelled, like, you know, it's really obvious if people have subscribed that there wouldn't be a meeting, for example.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. KD, I see your hand.
Oh, yes. I just, you asked about the format, and it seems like in the same 8x11 space, you've made the calendar visually much bigger, so it's much easier to see. And I, as someone who just got progressive lenses, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not a design person, so I can't quite put my finger on anything else, but it does seem visually easier to follow, and I appreciate that. And the placement and the choices, I think, are awesome. It sounds like it's perceived as a win for multiple groups. Certainly, I've gotten really positive feedback from community members that I've asked about it as well. So, awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, based on the preliminary feedback we have from parents, staff, and admin, it's a win-win-win.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's rare, but we're glad to do it.
Thanks for bringing it up, everyone. I'm not sure we would have poked it without the encouragement to do so, and that it was worth the extra dialogue, but it was really a productive conversation, I think, with each constituent group, and then to take a look at the formatting at the same time. So I think we felt really good about bringing this back to you today.
Oh yeah.
And Dr. Yannicone, do you want to see the last one?
Sure, we can share the 28. So these two, 26, 27 and 27, 28 had been board approved. So they'll be on tomorrow night. And so will 28, 29, because, you know, we try to be 3 years out. And so 28, 29, I just want to show very happily, see that September 5th after Labor Day start. Eileen, I was waiting for your joy in particular. And so, yeah, we go back in the 4 or 5 rule, we go back to after Labor Day. in 28, 29. So I also want the community to be able, and they were thrilled to know that this was not a permanent change for before Labor Day. So we go right back to after Labor Day, and I believe that continues for like 5 years. So we're in a good place, and it's very much the same calendar. The only changes that you'll see is that in May, let's go to like the spring, April, May. So there is some discussion at the State House about when the primary day will be in the state of Pennsylvania on an election year relative to other years.
I'm going to go back to the 27, 28 for that one because it's spring of 28.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you will see, which we had already approved this, but you will see that the primary day is not in May, it's in April under the current calendar. And we do know, because the debate continues, Pennsylvania would like to be one of the earliest primaries. And there are other states that would also like to be one of the earliest calendars. And so there's a lot of jockeying going on towards that effect. So as of right now, that is the date. But from year to year, if things change, we will update the calendar accordingly. But people are typically used to a May professional development day and a May in-service day. So we did look at May 12th. For a half day to get in some PD, and then regardless of where the primary day falls.
So you would just, if the primary day moves, you just move that 25th?
That's correct. Yes. So, and we would adjust, like, for example, let's say they move it to March 21st. We'll move our PD day because there are a lot of opportunities that occur during a primary day, and we also don't want the students in session, because we've heard feedback from the community that that is a hardship for them on an election day. So now we can continue to discuss and debate that, but that's where we are right now. So I did want you to notice that. It's not different. We had already approved the calendar with April 25th previously, and then it bounces back to May. If you go back to that 28, 29 calendar, it bounces back.
Yes, ma'am. There we go.
And is it a fixed day of the week, or can it vary on the day of the week?
It is typically, historically, a Tuesday.
Okay.
Yes. And we'll just have to see, how things evolve in Pennsylvania. But for right now, all of that has been accounted for. Prom dates have been accounted for. All of that's been confirmed. And then we've been able to stick with second week, or the early teen week in June for end of the year, which a lot of parents are happy about because it has a ripple effect not only on ESY, but also on a lot of summer programming. And for the seniors, a lot of the colleges have shifted to orientations that week of the 18th in June. For example, in this calendar, like instead of doing the orientations just before arrival, they're doing them right after school ends. All right. So with that, we have an agenda item for tomorrow night, preloaded. That is these 3 calendars. I think we've gone through questions. Are there any other questions? Okay. So they'll be on tomorrow night. Thanks for the feedback last month. And I think we landed in a really good place.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Our last item on the agenda this evening is some updates from the Department of Education. There's been a lot of news coverage or conversation around these next 3 items. So I just want to make sure that you knew we were on top of it and what it's looking like for us here. The first is around the idea of structured literacy. Structured literacy, as you may or may not be aware of, is sort of grounded in what they talk about as the science of reading, which is the way in which the brain learns to read. What are the foundational skills that students need to acquire in order to have the ability to pull together the information, make sense out of it, and decode it in order to do those higher level things like comprehension. And so these are the components of the science of reading, but it is brought to Pennsylvania, as we often do here in Pennsylvania, and rebranded in structured literacy. And so under the last few years, Acts 135 and 47 of the school code have been amended. in which PDE basically gets in line with everybody else nationally to document their commitment to this approach to reading instruction for young children in particular. And so these acts have two components that apply to the changes that are coming our way. Instructional materials and intervention is part of it, and the other half is professional learning. So we'll talk about instruction first. PDE has rolled out a variety of requirements over the next few years. The first we've already completed, which is that we were required to report what curriculum resource we were using for K-3 students this year. As you know, we've talked about it at every meeting for the last 2 years, which is that we are using CKLA. I was going to do it as a quiz, but I thought that wasn't necessary. And so I was just going to give out some prizes for those of you who grabbed it first. But in fact, you know, we're using CKLA, which absolutely, we knew this. We knew it was right to choose something that was in the science of reading long before we were mandated to do so. So we were ahead of the curve. So all I had to do was talk about what we're doing. Next year, also a check in our box of administering benchmark tests in language arts and reading, in particular in grades K-3, 3 times a year. We already do that. We used to do it with Acadians, and now we do it with Dibbles. Basically the same test, slightly different measures, slightly different coding in the way they're called, but they're two different publishers. And so we already do that 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and you know that because we bring you back those results. And so we are already in compliance with that component also. That's the checkbox. Going into 27-28, that's the big lift year from PDE. We are awaiting recommendations and requirements for parental notification for students who demonstrate risk of reading deficiency. So if students are believed to fall in a certain category that currently is seen to be locally defined, we'll define what that category is, in which they're not special education eligible necessarily, but those who are at risk for deficiencies in their reading acquisition skills and are being monitored, we will need to communicate that to parents 3 times a year, beginning in the spring of kindergarten through 3rd grade. We may also do that after there, but you must do it through 3rd grade, beginning in 27-28. And that will be accompanied by a reading intervention plan that will be shared with parents. Exactly what we're doing, what we're targeting, and then the progress their child is making towards those goals in reading. And then beginning in 2028 and beyond, we'll be reporting the number of students who in grades K-3 are at risk of reading deficiency as indicated. So we'll be reporting that along with some other components to the Commonwealth every year at our end of year state reporting. Questions on the curriculum and instruction side? Lee?
So is there like a specific benchmark that we are expected to reach? Because obviously not all students are probably doing CKLA. And so do you have to document those proportion of students that are taking an alternative route to reading? Like how does that impact what we have to report and what we have to notify about?
Lee, those are our questions too.
Oh, okay.
There are lots of, picking my words, this is a recorded version. There are lots of requirements coming from the Department of Education. And as you know, the current governor sort of is committed to early education and ensuring students are ready for the skills that they need beyond 3rd grade. And we've actually talked about this as part of our comprehensive plan. It's the same reason we targeted 3rd grade reading as a major lift for us in our comprehensive plan. This ties these things together, not accidentally, right? And so the answer to that question is we don't know yet because it's not until 2027. So guidance and specifics have not been yet reported to us. What we've been told is that those who don't meet the requirement as the Department of Education determines it to be will receive technical assistance to help them improve their reading performance. But it's unclear, much like right now, schools that perform in particular areas in an at-risk category get technical assistance from the state. At this time, we do not qualify or require that level of support.
Are there other reading programs that are considered structured literacy, like EdMark?
EdMark is not considered structured literacy.
Right.
But yes, there's evidence approved. And in fact, you're supposed to be in compliance over the next couple of years with a approved document. Now, Pennsylvania has not yet made their own list. We're borrowing the Colorado list and the Virginia list, I think. there's a whole PDE site dedicated to structured literacy where you can read and see all of the approved tools and materials.
And then just one more question. This talks about students that are at risk of reading deficiency, but is there any thoughts or plans around identifying students that are reading exceptionally well and need maybe additional support in terms of more challenging materials and that sort of thing?
That's a great question. Not at this time that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That I believe that's beholden on us to and use our data in that way. And that's what we work on with our principals. Okay. So we're seeing some really nice growth this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing if that holds to our end of the year data. We're seeing some really impressive growth this year.
Thanks.
Katie?
So Lee, your question about some students are not using CKLA, is that like students who might be in learning support, or what were you referring to there?
Yeah, exactly that. Students that are different learners in terms of like they may be IEP guided, for example.
We have most of our students participating in CKLA, at least in knowledge at K3, to the extent feasible and appropriate, because we do believe that background knowledge only serves to benefit all children. So to the extent feasible or appropriate, we've been able to engage nearly most, I'm going to say at most, but not all is probably a strong word, but particularly K1, 2, a high level of students are participating in the knowledge, although they may receive their special education supports during the skills block of their day. Katie, did you have another question, or is that what that was it? Okay. Not to worry, though, there's still more requirements, which is that we initially were told that if you have some certifications, you have to make sure that even if teachers aren't teaching on those certificates, they are being trained. So if they are an early childhood, elementary, reading specialist, special education teacher, English language, those who work with multilingual students, and middle level certificates were all required to participate in some structured literacy training. And so we were in compliance with the early phases of that. Even if teachers were not acting on those certificates, if they had them, they needed the training. And strictly speaking, we worked to provide that for anyone who wanted it and those who were interested. However, that was not sufficient. So now there's more training required. So there's a requirement of at least one or two 10-hour series created by Pennsylvania that we need to have our faculty who have those certificates complete. And then beginning in 27 and 28, they are expected to bring forward expectations on some educators who will require advanced training. That may be reading coaches. It could be administrators. It's a little unclear, and those programs range from 30 to 90 hours of advanced coursework. So we're awaiting some guidance on what the criteria will be and who will decide and when, but we don't yet have that. But I did want you to know we were aware of it. So, when we start to talk about sort of what are the budgets for our professional development, for example, that's where we would be seeing impact if there's 90 hours of training required. Any questions for me about this part of the expectation on structured literacy? Okay. Oh, Eileen?
I'm sure you probably said it. I just can't remember. Tell me again what PDE stands for.
The Pennsylvania Department of Education. I'm so glad you asked.
Okay.
I try not to do that, and I did it anyway.
No, that's okay. I figured it was something like really obvious. I just was like, let me just double check.
I would much rather you ask, and if anyone's watching this, they would ask too. So I try not to use acronyms for that very reason. Pennsylvania Department of Education. That said, they were busy, and I used it again. They also passed Act 2, which brings cursive back to our public schools. So cursive is on its way back, beginning, they just approved it. It's beginning immediately in the fall. We are required to include in cursive handwriting as part of ELA programming. As of today, there's flexibility on when and what we use in each local district. For us, as I told Dr. Yannico the day this was announced, we were already ahead of the game because CKLA already had a cursive workbook for grades 3 and 4, which is where we're going to put it. We're not at this time going to need to purchase any additional curriculum materials. We just have to figure out cursive instruction and handwriting instruction in cursive is not built into the required minutes for CKLA. So we need to sort of conceptualize how many minutes kids will need to practice that and then figure out where that'll fit in our school day. Questions for me about cursive? Eileen?
So happy.
I see that. I'm glad
I'm
for you.
so happy. So for the older kids who obviously are too old for like this kind of stuff. Will there be any instruction at bare minimum to teach them what it means and how to actually sign their name as a signature? Since that is one thing they will absolutely need moving forward.
I believe that gets integrated in different conversations and different programs. They bring that up. Different students or their families work on that, I believe, outside of that, not necessarily in a structured way at this time. Good question, though. Any other questions for me about cursive? And again, Pennsylvania wasn't wondering what to do with their time in the Department of Education, nor were they wondering what we should do with our time. They also decided that it would be super cool if school districts were responsible to ensure that families fill out their financial aid application going forward beginning next year. Every senior will be required under Act 47 to complete the FAFSA or alternatively submit an opt-out form. So you either have to do it or opt out, and school districts will be evaluated, obviously, and for documenting our attempts at outreach and follow-up and completion of their federal student loan applications.
So even if you're
Federal
not
student
completing a
assistance
form, you have to
applications.
complete a form.
What?
Even if you're not completing a form, you have to complete a form.
That's correct.
That's awesome.
Or
That's
more importantly, we have to document that we tried to get you to complete the form to do the form. Lee?
So just the whole cursive thing, which I'm surprised about, I guess. Is there anything mandating the fact that students need to learn to type?
No, not at this time.
Because that almost seems like a better use of time than learning cursive, maybe in terms of future-proofing skills, but that's my opinion.
Perhaps you and Eileen can have this conversation tomorrow at the board meeting because, you know,
I just
Dr.
need them to
Yannicone and I
sign
were
their
not
name.
asked our opinion prior to this passing either of these items. Dr. Yannicone and I don't believe that the superintendents were sought out for their insight into cursive instruction or FAFSA completion.
I mean, I can write cursive with a fountain pen, but I can type pretty fast, but I cannot touch type. I wish I could touch type.
So as you know, oftentimes elected officials are lobbied for particular points of view, and these are two of the recent successful lobbies. And so there was a concern several years ago, you may recall, that financial literacy should be a graduation requirement. And so we added it to the programming. Structured literacy and the requirements for assessment and implementation is now a requirement. Cursive is now a requirement. Filling out the FAFSA form is now a requirement. It is interesting that the state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, has not reduced any requirements. They just keep adding requirements to our standards and expectations for schools. There's lots of mandates coming out of the federal government and the state government with no additional funding and no additional time. That said, we will do as we are directed under state law and federal law, and we will get it done.
We are here for it.
Right, Dr. Johnston?
Absolutely. Lee, did you have another question, or is that your same hand raised from before? Okay.
No, I'm all good. Thank you.
Yeah. Like I said, this is why I wanted you to know these were things that some you may or may not have seen, you may or may not be hearing about. And I think Dr. Yannicone and I both felt like we're so fortunate to work with a well-informed board who's aware of what's happening, that we wanted you to know that we knew about these things. We have a plan and we are moving towards implementation. Not to be surprised, Dr. Lutz, as someone who supervises the high school counselors, already has a SMOR ready to go on how we're doing this, what the process and timeline will be. We are ready to push, send and deliver when we get to the fall.
It'll be interesting to see the school community feedback about the cursive aspect. Sort of interested to see what feedback you get.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, the kids always think it's really cool. It's like a secret code. So there are teachers who currently provide cursive instruction and have for years. So depending on who your third or fourth grade teacher is, it may already be a piece of what you've done. Years ago, we had a sixth grade teacher who loved cursive, and she often offered activities for kids to practice their cursive. So I think it's one of those things that for some, they've held on to.
To Arlene's point, I think there is a strong interest in ensuring that every student can sign their name to a document. Beyond the signature, I think there is debate about the relative value of cursive for other
Maybe we
items,
can
but
put that
definitely
in.
the signature seems to be fairly universal, even though there is a digital way to get a cursive signature now.
Correct. And we often sign papers on the computer. But nonetheless, here we are. Any other questions for me about those PDE mandates? Final questions or comments? I just want it noted that it is 4:43, well ahead of schedule. Any other questions or comments for me or for Dr. Yannicone? Okay. If we had public comment, I would invite that at this time, but at this time there are no public participants in today's meeting. And so our final meeting of the year for this year is June 1st, also on Zoom at 4 o'clock. Anything else for the good of the order? With that, at 4:43, I think we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Katie, I'll make sure you have the minutes as soon as I can.